There's a legend folks whisper about along the dusty trails of the old frontier, a story of a lone rancher with a heart as barren as the desert plains and a young woman sold at a cruel auction. They say that when their eyes met beneath the scorching sun, something changed in that forsaken land. Pride clashed with desperation, and courage bloomed out of heartbreak. This was no ordinary marriage. It was a transaction that sparked a fire neither expected. So saddle up, partners, and journey with me into the wild heart of the frontier, where one woman's spirit redeemed a broken man and saved more than just his ranch. Adam Morgan had grown accustomed to solitude. For all 37 years of his life, he had resided in the same corner of dusty West Texas on a ranch just a few miles outside of Laredo. Surrounded by nothing but rugged mesquite trees, scrubby grass, and the distant hum of cicadas at dusk, he had learned to wake up before dawn and collapse into bed after sundown, the daily chores leaving him so exhausted he barely dreamed. Work was what he understood. Life, as far as he knew, was a barren expanse of routine. He had inherited Morgan's Pride Ranch from his late father, Robert. Bob Morgan, a man known for raising Mustangs and Longhorn cattle. Bob had once been a friend of legendary lawman Wyatt Earp, or so the old stories said. In the local saloons, folks recounted that Earp had passed through Laredo on his way to El Paso, even sharing a bottle of whiskey with Bob Morgan one fateful evening in 1878. Adam wasn't sure how much was truth and how much was tall tale, but the notion that his father brushed shoulders with real frontier legends sparked a quiet pride in Adam's veins. But with Bob gone these past 7 years, Adam had let the stories fade into the background. He was alone to pay the ranch bills, feed the animals, keep the fences mended, and negotiate with the local railroad men who were inching ever closer with their tracks. The ranch's acreage stretched wide, yet the land had grown parched and punishing under a relentless drought. His mother, Margaret Morgan, had passed away soon after childbirth, leaving Adam without siblings or immediate family. One scorching afternoon, when the local bank threatened foreclosure, Adam found himself in Laredo's dusty main street, searching for a way to salvage his inheritance. He'd been told of an auction that might help him acquire new breeding stock, or allow him to sell off some spare gear. Clinging to the hope that a small stroke of fortune might appear, he arrived at the open-sided auction barn. He didn't expect, however, to find a human auction in progress, much less one that involved a trembling young woman with bruises along her wrists. A hush fell over the crowd as the auctioneer, a portly man named Elwood Prendergast, announced lot number 30, Rachel Dawson. She wore tattered clothes, her hair a tangled mess, and her eyes told a story of unimaginable sorrow. At first, Adam felt sick to his stomach. He had witnessed a lot of heartbreak in his life, but seeing a person bartered like cattle, it was almost too much. Adam turned to leave, but the sight of Rachel being shoved forward by her father, Jeremiah Dawson, made him pause. Dawson's cold, scowling face was well known in Laredo. His gambling debts and drunken tirades were no secret, and rumor had it he'd lost everything. Not even the local saloon would extend him credit anymore. Rachel, still a teenager by the look of her slight figure, was apparently the final possession he was willing to sell. The bidding started low. A handful of old men looked on with discomfort. Perhaps some had come to make unsavory offers, or were simply gawking at the travesty. Adam's stomach churned at the thought. The girl was so afraid she could barely lift her eyes from the ground. Something in Adam's heart clenched a spark of anger and pity lighting up his chest. When the auctioneer's voice wavered, stalling at a humiliatingly small amount, Adam found himself stepping forward. He thought of doing anything to end that spectacle. Before he could reason himself out of it, Adam lifted his hand and called $20. The silence that followed could have swallowed the entire barn. Stunned faces turned toward Adam. Everyone knew who he was, the solitary Morgan boy, shy and quiet, but fiercely protective of what he considered his own. Dawson sneered at him from the platform, probably hoping to eke out more money. "Do I have 25, Prendergast asked, voice scraping across the tension. Someone at the back coughed. A gambler from out of town made a bored expression. A few seconds passed, and the auctioneer was about to drop the gavel. Adam's heart thundered in his chest, torn between the revulsion at this entire situation and the sense that he could not let this abused girl be carted off to an even crueler fate. Then from the opposite side of the barn, a leering ranch hand named Clyde Bigsby, infamous for leaving battered women in his wake, rasped, $30. Adam's anger flared. He had heard stories about Clyde's brutality and how he treated the so-called dance hall girls up near the border. Looking at Rachel's frightened eyes, Adam felt an instinctive, protective urge. He raised his hand again and forced out $50. The auctioneer's eyebrows shot up. $50 was no small sum, especially in those trying times. An uneasy murmur rippled through the crowd. Would Clyde keep pushing Adam, braced for another bid? Clyde grimaced a sick grin, twisting his lips. 60, he answered, practically spitting the word. Adam realized he was stepping onto a dangerous path. Clyde Bigsby wasn't above a later confrontation that involved fists or guns. But Adam had come all this way. He wasn't going to back down now. Digging deep into the meager reserves he had earmarked for ranch repairs, he bellowed $100 in a voice loud enough to startle the onlookers. Jeremiah Dawson, standing on the makeshift stage next to his daughter, blinked in astonishment. $100 could keep him flush in whiskey for weeks. Clyde's face darkened, and he looked ready to protest, but something maybe the size of the bid seemed to quell his ambition. The hush deepened. Prendergast gulped and began counting. Adam held his breath as the gavel came down on the final count. Sold to Adam Morgan of Morgan's Pride Ranch for $100. The crowd erupted in hushed whispers. Some women turned away, their expressions pained. Men glanced around in moral confusion, trying to decipher how they felt about the transaction. Rachel remained frozen eyes downcast until the final blow of the gavel. And just like that, Adam Morgan found himself the unwilling husband of a terrified young bride purchased like livestock on a scorching Texas afternoon. As soon as the paper was signed, an official, if not entirely proper, marriage contract. Rachel stood beside Adam in silence. He noticed her trembling hands, the old bruises turning yellow and green around her wrists. The memory of Clyde's sneer and Jeremiah's smug grin churned Adam's gut. It was nearly sunset when they left Laredo in Adam's old wagon. Neither spoke as the horse clip-clopped along the dusty path leading out of town. Every now and then, Adam glanced at Rachel, struggling to find the right words. He removed his worn leather hat and ran a hand through his sweat-drenched hair. "I'm sorry," he finally said in a gentle tone. She blinked, still looking down. "For what?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "For everything." Adam sighed, staring at the empty horizon. "For that awful auction. For buying you." He couldn't meet her eyes. The shame was too great. I couldn't stand to see you end up with that scoundrel Clyde Bigsby." Rachel shifted in her seat, swallowing hard. "Thank you," she managed. I thought I'd be stuck with someone like him." They said nothing else for a while. The sky turned shades of orange and purple. The shadows lengthened, and the cacti along the road seemed to watch them with silent judgment. In the distance, a coyote howled. At last they arrived at Morgan's Pride Ranch. The main house was a modest adobe structure with a pitched roof not grand by any means, but sturdy enough to endure the harsh environment. Next to it stood a small barn for horses and cattle and a round corral for the mustangs. A windmill creaked in the breeze, the water trough below it half full from the last meager rainfall. Adam guided Rachel off the wagon, feeling her hesitate at the threshold to his home. He led her inside. The living room was sparse, a couple of battered chairs, a table, a fireplace. He lit an oil lamp, revealing a soft glow. "I'll show you your room," he said, the words sounding stiff. He offered her the only bedroom with a proper bed, his own. Adam had been sleeping on a simple cot in that same room since childhood, but now he chose to move the cot into the front room. "You can stay here," he told her. "I'll sleep outside. Well, out here in the front for now." Rachel looked at the bed with disbelief. "But this is yours," she protested softly. "I'll manage," he insisted, more abrupt than intended. He cleared his throat, feeling a wave of awkward heat creep up his neck. "Good night." He left her standing in the dim lamp glow, shutting the door gently behind him. Only then did Adam allow himself a shuddering breath. He had no idea how to handle any of this. The presence of another soul, let alone a wife, sent his mind spinning. The stifling guilt of having purchased her for money twisted in his chest. For a man used to being alone, it felt like his entire world had just been upended in a single day. That night, Adam lay awake on the creaky cot in the front room, staring at the cracked ceiling. He could hear Rachel's barely audible movements beyond the closed door. Every now and then the breeze outside caused the shutters to rattle, echoing against the loneliness of the night. He recalled how her eyes had flickered with both relief and fear. A part of him wondered if he was any better than the men who had leered at her in that auction barn. Yes, his intentions had been different. He'd only bid to protect her from a worse fate. But the outcome was the same. He owned her. That thought gnawed at his conscience. Sleep offered no reprieve, and Adam rose before dawn, as he always did. He lit another lamp and set about preparing coffee. His movements were slow, methodical, as he fought the tightness in his chest. This was not how he had imagined saving his ranch. The ailing ranch that needed labor, needed money, needed good stock. And now instead he'd spent a chunk of his savings to rescue a girl he knew nothing about. As the smell of coffee drifted through the house, the bedroom door creaked open. Rachel stepped out, eyes flicking around the room like a rabbit expecting a predator. She wore the same worn dress, her tangled hair partly tied back. Adam noticed bruising near her collarbone. He wondered what kind of abuse she'd endured at the hands of her father or others. "Morning," Adam said gently, trying to sound warm despite the knot in his throat. He poured her a cup of coffee and motioned to the small kitchen table. "Have a seat. I'll see what I can rustle up for breakfast." Rachel sat folding her hands around the mug, which seemed too big for her thin fingers. She inhaled the coffee's aroma. "Thank you," she repeated, voice still subdued. Adam rummaged through a nearly empty larder, a few eggs, some stale biscuits, a meager slab of bacon. He fried them in a cast-iron skillet over the fire, occasionally sneaking a glance at Rachel. She sat very still, as though afraid to do or say anything that might anger him. I'm not. Adam started, then paused, struggling for words. I'm not here to hurt you. I know this whole situation is strange. I want you to feel safe. That's all. She nodded, her eyes meeting his for the first time. They were the color of clouded amber, haunted yet with a flicker of warmth. I believe you, she whispered. The tension between them softened a fraction. When breakfast was ready, they ate in silence. Adam tried to take slow, calm bites, hoping she would feel less anxious if he didn't rush or speak harshly. He told himself that once the dust settled, he would try to help her find some semblance of normal life, if such a thing was even possible. But first he had to keep the ranch from falling apart. Over the next few days, Adam went about his chores, milking cows, feeding horses, repairing fences, while Rachel remained mostly inside. She'd occasionally stand at the window watching him ride out to survey the property or haul water from the well. Whenever he'd glance toward the house, he'd catch her silhouette in the glass. He started leaving simple tasks for her, like mending shirts or tidying up his old books. She took on the chores with quiet diligence, seemingly grateful for something to occupy her mind. Adam noticed she worked with surprising efficiency, as though used to long hours and thankless tasks. Her posture was always stiff, shoulders tense, as if prepared for a blow that never came. At night, Adam retreated to the cot. Rachel remained behind the bedroom door, which he never once tried to open unless he heard her speak. Slowly, they developed a polite, even tender routine of minimal conversation. The second week, a letter arrived from the Laredo bank. The words threatened foreclosure if Adam didn't catch up on payments soon. Grim-faced, he tucked the letter into a drawer, not wanting to burden Rachel with the failing finances. But his anxiety rose, swirling like a dust devil in his thoughts. One morning, as Adam was saddling up to check on the upper pasture, Rachel appeared at the barn door. She looked timid but determined. I can help, she said. Adam paused, considering. With chores, she nodded. Yes. I know how to handle horses a bit. My father made me do it sometimes to earn him extra money. She took a shaky breath. I can ride, and I'm pretty good at patching roofs or cleaning stalls if you'll let me. Part of Adam wanted to protest that she should rest or stay safe inside, but a wave of financial desperation urged him otherwise. All right, he replied. If you're willing, I could use an extra pair of hands. So it began. Rachel shadowed Adam all over the ranch, watching how he fed the Mustangs and drove them from one corral to another. She learned to brace fence posts in the rocky ground. Though slender, she displayed surprising stamina, a testament to the hardships she must have endured before. When Adam asked if she was tired, she'd shake her head adamantly, as if she feared being sent away. Over the next weeks, they became a quiet partnership. Their conversations were limited to practical matters: how much feed the horses needed the best way to soak a split rail, which corner of the pasture needed clearing. But with each day, something shifted in the air between them. A tentative respect formed, underlined by mutual appreciation for the other's presence. During one mid-afternoon break, they rested under the shade of a scrawny mesquite. Adam handed Rachel a canteen of water, which she accepted gratefully. They were both sweaty and dusty, the Texas sun scorching overhead. "How old are you?" Adam asked, careful to keep his tone gentle. She hesitated, her gaze distant. 18, she said. Adam felt a pang in his chest. She was nearly 20 years younger than he was. That difference struck him like a hammer. But how else could he have saved her at the auction? He offered a tight nod, swallowing his unease. What happened? He asked, his words cautious. How did your father come to do that? Rachel pressed her lips together, her eyes fixed on the horizon. My mother died when I was 10, she whispered. Pa took to drinking, then gambling. Things got worse every year. He lost the farm. We had lost everything. Then She closed her eyes, and Adam watched as a tremor racked her slight body. When he was desperate, he started, hurting me, forcing me to do things to bring in money. Adam felt a surge of anger enough to clench his fists. He took a steadying breath. You don't have to say more if you don't want to. She cast him a look filled with sadness and relief. Thank you, she said softly. As silence settled between them, thunder grumbled in the distance. A gathering storm began to darken the horizon. Adam could see lightning flicker behind the clouds, smell the electric tang in the air. Rain was a blessing, but a storm could also bring destructive winds. We better get back, he said. They rushed to gather tools, check that the animals were secured, and latch the barn doors. As the first fat drops spattered on the dusty ground, Adam and Rachel ducked inside the house. The wind picked up slamming shutters and tossing debris across the yard. A flash of lightning lit the sky, followed by a boom of thunder that shook the walls. Rachel's breathing quickened, her eyes darting. Adam realized she was frightened by the storm, perhaps unused to these sudden onslaughts of nature. He guided her gently away from the windows, closing them to keep out the driving rain. Thunder rattled the glass, and Rachel flinched, letting out a small gasp. Adam hesitated, then placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. She tensed at first, then gradually relaxed beneath his reassuring touch. You're safe here, he murmured, voice barely audible over the roar of the rain. This house is old, but it's solid enough to stand the worst of it. She nodded, blinking back tears. Adam led her to a corner of the main room, lighting a lantern as the storm continued to thrash outside. They sat on the floor, listening to the wind howl and the roof groan. And through the tempest, they shared a fragile calm. Adam's arm around her shoulders, both of them clinging to whatever comfort they could find in that battered ranch house. In the days following the storm, the ranch's water troughs were blessedly full, and the parched land soaked up every drop of moisture. The mustangs whinnied with renewed energy. The cattle grazed a bit more contently, and the air felt less oppressive. Adam noticed a subtle change in Rachel. She carried herself with a touch more confidence, though her eyes still bore the haunted look of someone who had seen too much suffering, too young. She took the initiative in tasks, waking early to start the coffee or feed the hens. Adam would find her already at work by the time he trudged to the barn. One afternoon, while repairing a broken fence in the upper pasture, they discovered a colt limping near the brush. The little horse had somehow gotten tangled in barbed wire. Adam gently approached, speaking in a low, soothing tone so as not to scare it. Rachel followed, and together they coaxed the injured colt out of the snag. Hold him steady, Adam instructed, pulling out a canteen of water to clean the wound. Rachel crouched close, stroking the colt's mane. Shh, she whispered, voice quavering with empathy. It's all right, boy. We've got you. The colt's eyes rolled in fear, but Rachel's gentle touch seemed to calm the animal. Adam carefully wiped away the blood and examined the cut. It's not too deep, he said, relieved. He'll heal, but it needs dressing. Rachel nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. Poor thing, she said. It's like he's been abandoned out here. Adam paused, noticing the heartbreak in her tone. He'll be okay, he assured her, though he suspected she wasn't just talking about the colt. Once they had cleaned and wrapped the wound, Rachel continued to stroke the horse, murmuring quiet reassurances. Something about the way she spoke, her voice low and comforting, unnerved Adam. It reminded him that beneath the meek exterior lay a heart brimming with compassion, a capacity to heal and nurture. Later they led the colt back to the ranch. Rachel tended it with unwavering devotion, ensuring the bandages stayed clean. Over the next week, the horse's injuries improved dramatically. Adam watched the patience and kindness in Rachel's every move, feeling a warmth grow in his chest. A sense of awe crept over him. For so long, he had believed that darkness and loneliness were inevitable. Now with Rachel there, it felt like a single flickering lamp lighting the corners of a gloomy room. Life, however, offered little time to settle into hope. A letter arrived at the ranch from an old rival, Clayton Bogard, a neighboring rancher with a long-standing feud against the Morgans. He was known to be unscrupulous when it came to acquiring land and water rights. Adam's father once told him that Clayton had threatened the Morgan family repeatedly, trying to buy them out or force them into default. The letter, written in an elegant hand, stated that Beauregard wished to discuss matters of mutual interest and would be visiting soon. Adam felt a knot form in his stomach. He suspected that the discussion would revolve around him selling the ranch. Sure enough, a few days later, a horse-drawn buggy appeared at the front gate, kicking up dust. Clayton Beauregard was a tall, broad-shouldered man with graying hair at his temples. He wore an expensive suit and a smug expression that set Adam's nerves on edge. Adam met him outside, Rachel lingering near the barn, watching from a distance. Beauregard dismounted with a confident flourish. Adam Morgan, he greeted, tipping his hat with mock cordiality. "It's been a while." "Not long enough," Adam replied, crossing his arms over his chest. "What brings you out here?" Beauregard cast a glance around the ranch. "I heard rumors you might be struggling," he said smoothly. "I thought I'd offer a neighborly hand, maybe take this place off your shoulders for a fair price." Adam's jaw tightened. Morgan's pride is not for sale. Beauregard shrugged, unruffled. "Not yet, but from what I hear, the bank is knocking at your door. If you wait too long, you won't see a dime. The bank will claim it, and you'll be left empty-handed." Adam's fists clenched. He forced himself to remain calm. "I'll manage," he said through gritted teeth. Beauregard chuckled. "Suit yourself. I'll make an offer you can't refuse eventually." He turned to spot Rachel standing a few yards away. His gaze flicked over her, a cruel curiosity lighting his eyes. "Who's this?" Adam's voice went rigid. "My wife." Rachel stiffened under Beauregard's scrutiny. A slow smirk spread across the man's face. "I heard something about an auction in town. Could it be—" He let the question dangle. Adam felt a surge of protective fury. "That's none of your concern." Beauregard took a step forward, tipping his hat to Rachel in mock politeness. "Mrs. Morgan," he drawled. "Must be quite the adjustment living way out here. Perhaps you're finding your husband less than adequate in certain resources." "Leave, Adam," demanded, his voice threatening. Beauregard eyed him with a mixture of humor and contempt. "Certainly. I have business to attend to. But mark my words, this ranch will be mine sooner or later." He tipped his hat again, climbed back into his buggy, and wheeled away, leaving a trail of dust. Adam stood there, shoulders tense until the sound of hooves faded. Rachel approached cautiously. Who was that? She asked. Clayton Beauregard, Adam muttered. A snake in human form determined to buy up every ranch around here. He exhaled, turning to look at her. Don't let him scare you. I'll figure something out. But in truth, Adam felt a pang of dread. Beauregard's threats weren't idle. The man was rumored to have ties to unscrupulous railroad men and bank officials. If foreclosure loomed, Beauregard would swoop in like a vulture over carrion. As the tension with Beauregard hovered like a storm cloud, Adam and Rachel's relationship changed in subtle ways. One evening, after a brutally hot day, they found themselves sitting on the porch, sipping cool water laced with a bit of lemon. The sun sank behind the rolling hills, painting the sky with pink and gold. Rachel pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, even though the heat still lingered in the air. "Thank you for letting me stay," she said, softly. Adam frowned. "Rachel, you don't have to thank me. This is your home now." She hesitated, glancing down at her hands. "It's just, no one's ever treated me like I mattered," she said, tears threatening to surface. "I know this isn't a normal marriage. I know what people must be saying. But here on this ranch, I'm finally safe." Adam reached out gingerly, taking her hand in his. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't pull away. "I'm not proud of how it happened," he said, voice low. "But I'd do it again if it meant keeping you out of harm's way." She looked up, her eyes catching the fading light. For a moment, Adam felt their hearts beat in unison, a quiet connection, bridging the gap of fear and regret. Slowly, he raised her hand and pressed it to his chest. "This ranch is all I have left," he murmured. "I've been alone a long time. If you're here, that might change." Rachel's expression softened. She gave a small nod, leaning ever so slightly toward him. Adam could smell the faint scent of lavender soap she used mingling with the night air. A gentle breeze drifted past, carrying the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. For one fleeting moment, Adam forgot the threat of foreclosure, forgot Beauregard's looming presence, forgot the shameful memory of that auction barn. All he saw was the young woman beside him, forging a new path out of a broken past. Desperation made Adam consider the unthinkable, a trip to El Paso to consult with the railroad men. Rumor had it they were looking for land to build stockyards and depots. If Adam played his cards right, perhaps he could negotiate a deal that would bring in much-needed funds. But traveling to El Paso and leaving Rachel alone was risky. He mentioned it to her one morning as they prepared to load hay bales onto a wagon. "I might be gone a few days if I go," he said, tossing a bale onto the cart. Rachel paused. "Will I stay here by myself?" Adam wiped the sweat from his brow. "I hate the thought of leaving you alone," he admitted. "But you could handle things, right? You're tough, Rachel." She nodded slowly, though her gaze was anxious. "I can manage, as long as you'll come back soon." He looked at her heart, twisting. The idea of leaving her behind made him uneasy. Still, the ranch finances were dire. "I will," he promised. A few days later, Adam set off before sunrise, leaving Rachel with a rifle and instructions on how to protect herself if necessary. He rode his best horse, determined to cover the distance quickly. In El Paso, the bustling streets and locomotive whistles overwhelmed him at first. He had rarely ventured so far from the ranch. After a day of fruitless meetings and half-hearted negotiations, he finally found a railroad official named George Kipling an acquaintance of the famed Colonel Robert G. Ingersoll, or so the rumors went. Kipling seemed intrigued by the idea of turning Morgan's pride into a staging ground for mustangs. Over whiskey in a dingy saloon, Kipling outlined a potential deal. If Adam could prove his ranch had enough water sources and infrastructure, the railroad might build a small depot there. The idea thrilled Adam, but it wasn't a guaranteed salvation. He'd have to invest in improvements first, money he didn't have. Still, it was a chance. He left El Paso with a spark of hope in his chest. Adam's return journey was plagued by uneasy thoughts. He dreaded seeing any sign of Beauregard's meddling. He also worried about Rachel had she fared well on her own. Each mile made him more anxious. When he finally arrived, dust-caked and weary, it was nearly dusk. The ranch seemed eerily quiet. He found Rachel in the barn tending the animals. Relief flooded him at the sight of her safe and unhurt. She rushed to him, concern etched into her features. "Adam, you're back. Are you all right? You look exhausted." He slid off his horse, giving a tired nod. "I'm fine," he said. "How are things here?" Her expression wavered. "Some men came by 2 days ago," she said in a hushed tone, glancing over her shoulder. "They rode in on horseback. At first I thought they might be rustlers, but then one of them introduced himself as working for Clayton Beauregard. They demanded to check our fences and water pumps, claimed they had the right to inspect them. I told them to leave, so they threatened me." Adam's blood ran cold. "Threatened you?" Rachel swallowed. "They said if I knew what was good for me, I'd convince you to sell." She held up her arm, revealing finger-shaped bruises. "One of them grabbed me, but I fought back and they left." Fury surged through Adam. He cursed under his breath, pacing the barn in agitation. "I'll kill them," he growled. "They have no right." Rachel took his arm gently. "I was afraid you'd do something rash. I hid in the house the rest of that day, rifle by my side. I'm just grateful they didn't do worse." Adam embraced her, feeling her heart race against his chest. "I'm sorry," he murmured, tears stinging his eyes. "I should have been here." She clung to him, her voice trembling. "We need a plan, Adam. We can't let Beauregard bully us. But we're not safe unless we can secure this ranch." As night fell, Adam recounted his trip to El Paso and the potential deal with the railroad. Rachel listened intently, her eyes lighting up with a fierce resolve. "If that's our chance," she said, "then we must try. I'll do whatever it takes to help." The next weeks were a whirlwind of hard labor and planning. Adam and Rachel worked tirelessly to mend fences, dredge old wells, and clear brush for potential railway lines. They sold off a few horses and some old equipment to gather money for supplies. Rachel scoured the ranch's ledgers, discovering hidden inefficiencies in how Adam managed feed and water. She reorganized the inventory, cut costs, and devised ways to stretch their resources. Adam marveled at her quick mind and organizational skills. For so long he had assumed she'd only known a life of abuse and submission. Now he saw a resourceful partner, someone with the intellect to see solutions where he saw dead ends. Despite the grueling days, an unspoken bond flourished between them. They shared meals at the kitchen table, discussing strategies to keep Beauregard at bay. At night, they sat on the porch, quietly savoring the cool desert breeze, sometimes exchanging gentle words that hinted at the feelings blossoming between them. But with each minor triumph came an undercurrent of anxiety. Beauregard's men continued to prowl the outskirts of the ranch. Once Rachel caught a glimpse of them by the creek, muttering curses when they realized they'd been seen. Another time, Adam found a severed fence line clearly cut by wire snips, allowing some of his cattle to wander off. "We'll not bend?" Adam told Rachel, set with determination. "I'd rather see this place burn than sell it to that vulture." "We won't bend," she agreed, her voice firm. "We'll fight." As autumn gave way to the colder months, the temperature plummeted. The nights became bitter, though the days remained sunny. Adam and Rachel found themselves huddling by the fireplace more often. One evening, a fierce wind rattled the windows, carrying the scent of snow, a rare occurrence in that part of Texas. Adam brought in extra firewood and stoked the flames in the hearth. Rachel sat on a small rug by the fireplace, warming her hands. He settled beside her, letting the fire's glow dance across his worn features. She looked at him, eyes reflecting the flickering light. "You've done so much for me," she murmured, hesitating. "Adam, do you regret it?" The question stung him. He took a moment to gather his thoughts. "Regret saving you from that auction? Never," he said, his voice carrying a quiet intensity. "If you mean, do I regret the cost? Also no. Having you here alive and safe is worth every cent." She exhaled, relief crossing her face. "Sometimes I'm still waiting for the nightmare to return, for my father to appear, or some man to remind me I'm just a possession." Adam turned to face her, fully placing a calloused hand gently against her cheek. "You're not a possession," he whispered. "You're free to leave any time. I hope you never do, but I'd never stand in your way." She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes briefly. "Thank you," she said, voice catching. I want to stay. With you." He felt his heart pound. They remained that way for a moment, the crackle of the fire underscoring the tension. Slowly, Adam leaned closer. Rachel's eyes fluttered open, meeting his. In the warm glow they bridged the gap, and their lips met in a gentle, hesitant kiss, one that carried all their shared pain and emerging hope. It was a tender gesture, a spark that illuminated how far they had both come. They parted after a moment, breath mingling in the fire's heat, and in that shared silence, everything changed. Despite the financial strain, Rachel insisted they celebrate Christmas, at least in a small way. She decorated the house with pine branches from the nearby hills, hung a few ribbons and crafted paper ornaments. Adam smiled at her enthusiasm, reminded of a warmth he hadn't felt since his mother's passing. The day before Christmas, a surprise visitor arrived, Pastor Gregory Finch, a kindly old clergyman from Laredo, who had once known Adam's parents. He rode up with a small cart, bringing a few supplies, flour, sugar, and some winter vegetables donated by church members. "Word is you're working yourself to the bone out here," Adam, Finch said, smiling warmly as he greeted them. "I thought I'd come by and pay my respects, see this ranch for myself." Adam offered him a seat in the front room, grateful for the provisions. Rachel brewed tea, her shy demeanor returning as she greeted the pastor. Finch's eyes crinkled kindly when she told him her name, as if he already knew part of her story from the local gossip. "So this is the famous Mrs. Morgan," Finch said, giving her a gentle nod. "I've heard rumor of your bravery." Rachel blushed. "I'm not sure about brave," she murmured. Adam looked at her with admiration. "You underestimate yourself." Pastor Finch took out a worn Bible. "Christmas is a time of rebirth," he said. a time to remember that hope can bloom in the harshest winters. Perhaps I can share a short blessing with you both." They agreed, and the pastor read a passage about finding redemption in the face of adversity. As he spoke, Adam felt a sense of calm wash over him, an odd feeling considering the turmoil they still faced. Rachel sat quietly, tears glistening in her eyes, perhaps moved by the idea that their union forged in desperation could become something sacred and real. Finch ended with a prayer for the ranch, asking for guidance and protection against those who would do harm. Adam and Rachel exchanged glances silently, thanking the old pastor. When the clergyman left, he gave Adam a fatherly pat on the shoulder. "Remember, son," Finch said, "miracles can come in small packages." The new year arrived with fresh troubles. Beauregard's men became bolder. More fences were cut, and one night the barn door was left open, letting horses escape. Adam and Rachel spent frantic hours gathering the spooked animals in the moonlight. Then one night, a shot rang out near the house. Adam jolted awake, grabbing his rifle only to find a note pinned to the front door by a knife. "Sell, or we take everything." Fear battled rage inside Adam. He seethed, pacing back and forth in front of the hearth. Rachel stood nearby, her face pale with worry. "You should go," Adam growled at her voice, thick with emotion. "It's not safe here. If something happens—" She cut him off, surprising him with her steady gaze. "I'm not leaving you," she said firmly. "I'd rather stand by your side, no matter what happens." His shoulders slumped. He realized how much her resolve meant to him. They decided to see if the law would help, though neither held much faith in Laredo's sheriff, given Beauregard's influence. When Adam rode into town the next day, the sheriff seemed sympathetic but non-committal. "Do you have any proof it was Beauregard's men?" he asked with a tone that implied Adam could be overreacting. Adam fumed. "Who else would it be?" The sheriff shrugged. "I can't just go accusing a man like Clayton Beauregard without evidence. Keep an eye out. Lock your doors. And if you see anything more concrete, let me know." Defeated, Adam left the sheriff's office, feeling the noose tighten around his ranch. As he mounted his horse, he caught sight of Beauregard himself riding into town. Their eyes locked. The older man tipped his hat in a mocking salute, a cold smile on his lips. Adam's temper flared, but he refused to be goaded into a confrontation in the middle of Main Street. He turned his horse and galloped away, determined to protect what was his by any means necessary. 2 months later, Kipling from the railroad sent a telegram expressing readiness to conduct a final inspection of Morgan's pride. If the ranch passed muster, the railroad would sign a contract to establish a small depot, effectively solving Adam's money troubles. Adam and Rachel worked tirelessly to prepare. They put fresh paint on the barn, organized the corrals, made sure every water trough and windmill functioned properly. They even built a modest bunkhouse to house future railroad workers. Late one afternoon, Adam found Rachel taking a break under a cottonwood tree. She was sipping water, exhausted from hours of manual labor. He joined her, resting his back against the trunk. "You're doing too much," he said gently. "You need rest." She shook her head with a small smile. "We're almost there," she murmured. "Once the inspection is done, if it's successful." He placed a hand over hers. "It will be," he said, trying to project confidence. "Then we can finally breathe easy." She gazed at him, a mixture of love and worry etched on her features. "Adam, I just want you to know, no matter what happens, I'm grateful for every day here with you." His throat tightened. He was a man of few words, but the sentiment in her eyes unraveled his stoic heart. Leaning in, he pressed his forehead against hers. "You saved me too, Rachel," he whispered. "I didn't know how to live until you came." The night before, Kipling was scheduled to arrive. A fierce commotion startled Adam and Rachel from their beds. Outside, flames crackled. Someone had set the barn ablaze. Adam rushed outside with a bucket of water, yelling for Rachel to stay inside, but she refused, grabbing another bucket and racing alongside him. The barn was engulfed in a raging inferno. Horses panicked inside, whinnying in terror. "We have to save them!" Rachel shouted, voice drowned by the roar of the flames. Desperately, Adam soaked burlap sacks in water. He covered his face and charged into the barn. Thick smoke burned his lungs. He heard a horse kicking against a stall door. Coughing and gasping, he unlatched the stall and managed to lead the frantic animal out. Rachel doused the side of the barn with water, her eyes streaming from the smoke. She risked her life throwing bucket after bucket onto the flames to keep them from spreading to the house. Despite their heroic efforts, the barn was reduced to a smoldering skeleton. They managed to save some horses, but several were lost to the inferno. Exhausted, covered in soot and choking on smoke, they collapsed on the ground, clinging to each other as the first traces of morning light crept over the horizon. When Kipling arrived, he found a scene of devastation. Adam greeted him with a raspy cough, his clothes singed and face streaked with ash. Rachel stood at his side, her hair singed at the edges, bruises forming where she'd been struck by falling debris. Kipling surveyed the ruins of the barn. His dismayed expression spoke volumes. "Morgan." "What the devil happened here?" he asked, stepping carefully over the scorched ground. "Sabotage!" Adam croaked, anger simmering under his weariness. "Beauregard's men. I'd bet my life on it." Kipling frowned, removing his hat. "This complicates things. The railroad will want to see functioning facilities for the horses. With the barn gone," Adam felt a helpless fury coil in his stomach. "Give me time," he pleaded. "I'll rebuild. Kipling shook his head slowly. "I'm sorry, Morgan. The final decision isn't solely mine. The board expects immediate readiness. We can't postpone indefinitely." Rachel stepped forward, determination burning in her eyes. "We'll work day and night. We'll put up a temporary structure. At least inspect the rest of the ranch. You'll see we have water and grazing land." Her passion caught Kipling off guard. He scratched his chin. "I suppose I can write a more nuanced report," he conceded. "Show the board the potential here if they're willing to invest in rebuilding the barn. But there's no guarantee they'll approve it." Adam grabbed Rachel's soot-stained hand, feeling a wave of gratitude for her unwavering spirit. "Thank you," he said to Kipling. "Let me show you around." For the rest of that day, Adam guided Kipling across the ranch, highlighting the improved fences, the wells, and the corrals that had survived the fire. Despite the tragedy, the land itself remained strong, fertile enough for raising mustangs and building a depot. Meanwhile, Rachel organized a few ranch hands and neighbors who came to offer help after hearing about the fire. They salvaged what lumber they could, stacking it neatly. The community's support gave Adam hope. Maybe he wasn't as isolated as he'd always believed. That evening, Kipling took his leave, promising to do what he could, but making no guarantees. Adam watched him disappear into the dusky horizon, then turned to see Rachel standing by the charred remains of the barn. She reached for his hand. "We'll rebuild," she said firmly. He looked at her, tears threatening to spill. "I'm not sure I have it in me," he whispered. Rachel squeezed his hand. "Then lean on me," she said. "We'll do it together." Word of the barn fire spread quickly, even reaching the ears of Pastor Finch, who wasted no time organizing a small group of church volunteers. They arrived one morning with tools, lumber, and wagons of supplies. Among them was a middle-aged rancher named Carter Redwood, known for having once done business with Adam's late father. Carter offered not only labor, but also a small donation. "I've heard about Clayton Beauregard's underhanded tactics," Carter said grimly. "If you're determined to stand up to him, I'm with you." Adam, overwhelmed by gratitude, found himself speechless. Rachel stepped forward, expressing thanks on both their behalfs. In the days that followed, the ranch came alive with hammering sawing and communal determination. People Adam barely knew lent a hand, driven by a shared disgust for Beauregard's tactics. The foundations of a new barn began to rise, an act of defiance against intimidation. Rachel worked alongside them, never complaining, even when blisters formed on her palms. Her resilience inspired everyone. Quietly, Adam recognized that the once mistreated girl had become the heart of Morgan's pride, a force that willed the ranch to survive. Tensions reached a boiling point when Clayton Beauregard and his hired guns confronted Adam near the creek, demanding he surrender Morgan's pride. Outnumbered and seething with defiance, Adam stood his ground. Just as violence threatened to erupt, Carter Redwood and a group of loyal townsfolk appeared, rifles drawn, forcing Beauregard to retreat. It was a turning point, not just in their feud, but for the ranch itself. Adam wasn't alone anymore. The town had chosen sides, and they chose him. With renewed determination, Adam and Rachel worked tirelessly to restore what had been lost. Volunteers arrived with lumber and tools. The community, once distant, now rallied behind them, helping raise a new barn as a symbol of defiance. Rachel's hands, blistered and spirit unshaken, became the soul of the rebuilding effort. Her strength inspired everyone. By mid-spring, Morgan's pride had transformed. Flowers returned to the fields, the mustangs grazed peacefully, and hope hung in the air. When George Kipling from the railroad returned, he was stunned by the progress. Rachel led the tour confidently, explaining their water systems and livestock management. After a thorough inspection, Kipling gave his verdict: the railroad would move forward. It wasn't full security yet, but it was a promise of partnership and a lifeline. As the townspeople cheered and the sun dipped behind the hills, Adam and Rachel stood together, watching the wind ripple across the land they had saved. It was more than survival. It was a resurrection. And as the depot plans unfolded, the couple knew that this land, once soaked in hardship, would now be watered by the seeds of legacy love and labor. With spring's arrival and wildflowers in bloom, Adam and Rachel Morgan decided to rewrite their story, not with silence and scars, but with vows spoken freely before God and community. No longer defined by the shame of the auction, they planned a true wedding at the Laredo Church. Pastor Finch, who had walked beside them through fire and faith, gladly agreed to officiate. The church was adorned with fresh blooms and heartfelt support. Rachel wore a simple white dress. Adam stood tall in his father's suit. When they exchanged vows, the congregation erupted in applause. Their kiss was no longer hesitant. It was a promise sealed with pride and love. But peace was fleeting. On the eve of the railroad's arrival, Clayton Beauregard made one final desperate strike. Under cover of darkness, he and his men crept onto the ranch. Rachel awoke with a sinking feeling and roused Adam just moments before the first gunshot shattered the night. In a brutal exchange of fire, they defended their home with everything they had. Bullets tore through the quiet Texas night, sparks flying, hearts pounding. Then salvation. Pastor Finch and Carter Redwood arrived with armed ranch hands, lanterns blazing. Outnumbered and exposed Beauregard's men fled into the darkness. Adam caught sight of the defeated villain rifle, aimed fury burning. But Rachel's voice cut through the rage. Adam, don't. He's not worth it. Adam lowered his weapon. The war was over, not with blood, but with restraint, courage, and unity. As the dust settled, Adam and Rachel stood stronger than ever, not just as husband and wife, but as leaders of a land reclaimed through love and resistance. And though scars remained, the legacy they fought for was secure, built on sacrifice, bound by honor. As dawn broke over the scorched plains, railroad crews arrived at Morgan's Pride to begin laying the foundation of the depot that would secure the ranch's future. Though exhausted from the violent ambush, the night before, Adam and Rachel stood arm in arm on the porch, watching history unfold. The battle was hard fought against debt betrayal and a vengeful neighbor, but the tide had finally turned. Rachel leaned into Adam's shoulder and whispered, "We did it." He smiled and kissed her head. "You did it. You saved the ranch and me." Their love, once forged through desperation and survival, had grown into a deep, enduring partnership. The ranch bore scars, charred boards from the barn fire, bullet holes in fence posts, but it also bore proof of resilience, love, and hope. In the following months, the depot brought prosperity. Water systems improved, the Mustang program flourished, and investors backed the ranch. Beauregard's shadow faded. He vanished to New Mexico under the weight of disgrace. Rachel and Adam became local legends. People spoke of the auctioned bride who redeemed the lonely rancher. Together they turned Morgan's Pride into a sanctuary, welcoming travelers and women in need, offering shelter and dignity. Standing atop the hill overlooking the thriving land, Adam felt no shame, no fear, only gratitude. By his side was Rachel, the woman who had not only saved his ranch, but his soul. Their legacy was no longer one of pain, but of purpose, a reminder that in even the harshest terrain, love can take root and rebuild everything. From the scorching heat of a desperate auction to the defiant stand against a powerful enemy, Adam and Rachel Morgan's tale is a testament to the power of resilience and love. Their unlikely union, forged under the worst of circumstances, blossomed into a partnership that rebuilt a broken ranch and two broken hearts. Through grit, compassion, and the unwavering support of their community, they stood their ground against intimidation. In saving the ranch from financial ruin, Rachel also saved Adam from a lifetime of loneliness, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary bonds form when hope is all that's left. If this story moved you, inspired you, or simply entertained you, please take a moment to like this video. Share it with friends who love a good Wild West drama, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue bringing stories of courage, redemption, and the unstoppable force of the human spirit. Thank you for joining us on this journey.